I found him asleep on the couch at 2:47 in the afternoon, our son curled against his chest like a loaf of bread someone had forgotten to put away. The baby monitor was in the other room, unplugged, because Daniel said the static bothered him. The dog, a 70-pound shepherd mix named Otis who I loved dearly and did not trust around anything smaller than a toddler, was lying on the rug 3 feet away, head resting on his paws, watching the rise and fall of my son's back like he was deciding something. I didn't scream. I want that on the record, because later everyone acted like I'd come through the door swinging. I stood in the doorway of my own living room for a long 4 seconds, doing the math on how close Otis's nose was to Eli's face, how loose Daniel's arm had gone around him, how easily a 10-week-old could slide 6 inches down a chest and end up wedged between a cushion and a sleeping man's ribs. Then I crossed the room, slow and quiet, and lifted my son up and out of his father's arms without waking either of them until I was already at the bassinet. Daniel woke up when I set Eli down. He blinked at me, disoriented, the specific fog of a new parent who hasn't slept more than 3 consecutive hours in 10 weeks. "What time is it?" he said, not really a question. "You fell asleep holding him again," I said. "Otis was right there." "Otis wasn't doing anything." "That's not the point." He rubbed his face with both hands, and I watched him decide, in real time, to be annoyed instead of alarmed. "I was awake 5 minutes ago. I just closed my eyes for a second." "You were dead asleep, Daniel. I stood here for almost 5 seconds and you didn't move. So now you're timing me?" That's the version of this story where I'm supposed to say I understand. He's exhausted too. We're both drowning, and I did say that, out loud, more than once, in the weeks before this. What I didn't say, because I didn't fully let myself think it, was that exhaustion doesn't explain everything. It explains falling asleep. It doesn't explain choosing to lie down on the couch with an infant instead of putting him in the bassinet 8 feet away. It doesn't explain unplugging a monitor because the static annoyed you. It doesn't explain not moving a highly food-motivated dog out of the room first. This wasn't the first time. 3 weeks earlier I'd woken up at 4 a.m. and found Eli in the bed between us. Not in the co-sleeper we bought specifically because pediatricians tell you not to do this. Daniel had brought him in during a night feed and just not put him back. 2 weeks before that, I'd come home from a grocery run to find Eli and his bouncer on the kitchen counter, unstrapped, while Daniel loaded the dishwasher 4 feet away with his back turned. Every single time, the response was some version of "nothing happened," which is true. Nothing happened. Nothing happened is also what everyone says right up until the day something does. I tried the calm conversation approach first, because I am not a person who enjoys confrontation, and because I wanted to believe this was a communication problem, not a judgment problem. I made him a list not accusatory, just practical. Monitor stays on. Baby goes in the bassinet if you're tired, not on your chest on the couch. Dog stays in the kitchen during naps until Eli's bigger. He looked at the list like I'd handed him a legal document. "You don't trust me," he said. "I trust that you love him. I don't trust that you're making good decisions when you're this tired, and neither of us is sleeping enough to catch our own mistakes. Then help me. Don't police me." Here's the thing about that word, police, is that it did exactly what it was designed to do, which was make me feel like the villain in a story where I was trying to keep our child breathing. I backed off for a while after that conversation. I told myself I was overreacting, that new mothers are famous for exactly this kind of hypervigilance, that there's a whole body of research on postpartum anxiety making women see danger where there isn't any. I read 3 articles about it at 1 a.m. while nursing, looking for permission to stop worrying. I didn't find it. I found a study instead that said infant deaths from unsafe sleep environments spike specifically in cases where a caregiver is sleep deprived and dismisses safety guidance as excessive. I closed the tab and didn't tell Daniel I'd read it, because I already knew how that conversation would go. The day I found him asleep with Eli on his chest and Otis 3 feet away was the day I stopped trying to solve it quietly. That night, after Eli went down, I called my mother-in-law. Not to tattle, that's the word Daniel used later, and it still sits wrong in my chest, but because I was out of options that didn't involve me staying awake in shifts for the next 6 months. Carol had raised 3 kids and had, more than once, said things to Daniel that landed when nothing I said did. I laid it out for her plainly: the couch, the monitor, the counter, the bed. I told her I wasn't trying to make him look bad, I was trying to keep our son safe, and I needed someone he'd actually listen to. She was quiet for a second and then said, "Okay. I'll talk to him." That was it. No drama, no judgment of me. I felt, for the first time in weeks, like someone had believed me without making me prove it first. Daniel found out I'd called her 2 days later, when his brother, who apparently got the story secondhand and embellished, texted him something like, "Heard you almost smothered the baby, you good man?" Daniel came home that night with a version of anger I hadn't seen from him before. Not loud. Cold. "You went around me," he said. "You made me look like I can't take care of my own son." To my mother. To my brother, apparently, because clearly it didn't stay contained. "I didn't tell your brother anything. You told your mother-in-law her son is a danger to his own kid. What did you think was going to happen?" I thought maybe someone else saying it would land differently than me saying it for the 4th time. So you didn't trust me to hear it from you. You needed backup. I needed you to actually change something, Daniel, and nothing I said on my own was doing that. He didn't yell. He got very still, which with him is worse, and said he needed space, and slept in the guest room that night, and the night after. Carol called me 2 days later to check in, gently, and told me she really talked to him, not lectured, and that he'd been more defensive than she expected, but that she thought it had gotten through. She also, kindly and carefully, asked if I was doing okay, if I was sleeping at all, if I had support. I cried on the phone with my mother-in-law for the first time in the 2 years I'd known her, which was its own strange kind of relief. Daniel and I didn't fix it in one conversation. It took about 10 days, 2 of which he spent barely speaking to me beyond logistics, and one long night where we finally sat down without the baby between us. Carol had taken Eli for a few hours specifically so we could talk without a crying infant, setting the tone, and actually said the true things instead of the defensive things. He admitted, eventually, that some part of him had known the couch thing was risky and had done it anyway because he was too tired to walk the 8 feet to the bassinet, and that hearing it from his mother had embarrassed him in a way that cracked something open instead of just making him mad. I admitted that I hadn't given him a real chance to respond before escalating to Carol that I'd been so scared and so tired that I'd skipped a step, and that skipping it had cost us trust one now had to help rebuild. We're better now, 3 months out. Eli sleeps in his own space. The monitor stays on. Otis has a very good, very boring job of being kept in the kitchen during naps, which he resents deeply and communicates through pointed sighing. Daniel checks himself now, out loud, in a way he didn't before. I'm too tired to hold him right now, can you take him? Which is a small sentence that took a genuinely large fight to get to. I still think about that 4-second doorway moment more than I'd like to. Not because I think Daniel would have hurt our son on purpose, I never thought that, not for 1 second, but because I understand now that love and exhaustion can sit right next to real danger without either person noticing the line has moved. I don't know if calling Carol was the right call, exactly, or just the only one I had left. What I do know is that our son is safe, and asleep, in his own bassinet, 11 feet from where I'm sitting right now, and I can hear him breathing on the monitor that never gets unplugged anymore. That, more than anything either of us ID in that fight, is the part that lets me sleep.